The throne room fell silent when the Empress hurled her ceremonial blade at the marble floor, the metal ringing like a death knell through the vaulted chamber. Every ambassador, every noble, every guard froze, except for the human standing alone in the center of the hall. He didn't flinch. "You dare," Empress Valeth hissed, her silver skin flushing violet with fury as she descended the obsidian steps, her coronation robes trailing behind her like a storm cloud. "You dare refuse the tribute we are owed?" Marcus Cole, the sole representative of Earth's fledgling interstellar presence, kept his hands clasped behind his back. His dress uniform was plain compared to the jeweled garments surrounding him, a simple, dark fabric with Earth's insignia over his heart. Nothing more. "With respect, Your Imperial Majesty," he said, his voice steady. "Humanity doesn't trade in people. The colonists on Kepler-7 are citizens, not currency." A ripple of gasps moved through the Valkyrie nobility. The Empress's 4 eyes narrowed, her elongated pupils contracting to slits. "Your species has been part of the Galactic Covenant for 11 years, she said, each word sharp as broken glass. "You control 17 systems. We control 4,000. You think you have the standing to refuse me? Standing has nothing to do with it." The Empress stopped 3 steps from him. She was tall, all Valkyrie were, and in her heels, she towered over him by nearly a foot. Her face, angular and aristocratic, bore the traditional marks of her house, 3 parallel scars across her left cheek, self-inflicted on the day of her coronation, to prove she could endure pain. "Then explain," she said quietly, dangerously. "What does?" Marcus met her gaze. Behind him, he could hear the nervous shifting of his small diplomatic team. They'd warned him this was suicide. They'd begged him to negotiate. But some things weren't negotiable. "Principle," he said. "The colonists chose to settle that world. They built it with their own hands. Their children were born there. You can't just claim them. The Valkyrie Empire claimed that system 300 years before your species discovered fire. And then you abandoned it." Another gasp. "Body." Lord Ketharan, the Empress's uncle and chief advisor, stepped forward with murder in his eyes. "You insolent, enough." The Empress raised one hand, and Ketharan stopped mid-stride. She studied Marcus with an expression he couldn't read. Her species' micro-expressions were still largely a mystery to human xenopsychologists. "You know what happens to species that defy us," she said. "I do. You know we could glass your homeworld before your pathetic fleet even received the distress signal. I do. And yet you stand there." She tilted her head, those 4 eyes examining him like a specimen. "Why?" Marcus thought of his daughter, Emma. 7 years old, when the Kepler-7 colony ship launched, carrying her mother and 3,000 other hopeful souls to a new world. He'd stayed behind. Someone had to coordinate the supply lines, and Sarah had always been the brave one. The plague hit 2 years later. Sarah was among the first to die. Emma had grown up without her mother, in a colony that struggled and starved and nearly failed a dozen times. She was 19 now, studying agricultural engineering, working to make that stubborn red soil bloom. He would not let anyone take that from her. "Because some things matter more than survival," he said. "Your Majesty." The silence stretched. Around them, the court held its collective breath. Then the Empress laughed. It wasn't a pleasant sound, sharp and brittle, with an edge of something Marcus couldn't identify. She turned away from him, ascending the steps back to her throne. "You're either the bravest creature I've ever met," she said, settling into the obsidian seat, "or the most foolish. History will decide that, I suppose. History." She said the word like it tasted bitter. "History is written by the victors, human. And your species has never won anything. We're still here." For a moment, just a moment, something flickered across her face. Recognition, perhaps. Or memory. "Yes," she said softly. You are. She gestured to one of her guards. Take the human delegation to the guest quarters. We will continue this discussion tomorrow. Lord Ketharan stepped forward. Your Majesty, surely you can't mean to, I said tomorrow. Her voice cut like a blade. Unless you wish to question my judgment, uncle? The old noble's jaw tightened, but he bowed. Of course not, Majesty. As the guards escorted Marcus and his team toward the massive doors, the Empress's voice rang out one final time. Human. Marcus turned. She sat rigid on her throne, her face a mask. But her voice, when she spoke, carried something he hadn't heard before. Something almost like respect. My words will change the fate of 2 civilizations. I suggest you prepare yourself for what that means. The doors closed behind him before he could respond. The guest quarters were, predictably, bugged. Marcus found 17 surveillance devices in the first hour, and he was certain he'd missed at least a dozen more. He left them all in place. Removing them would only prompt replacement with more sophisticated versions. That went well, Lieutenant Chen said dryly, collapsing onto one of the oddly shaped Velkari chairs. We're alive, Ensign Patel offered. That's something. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the team's xenoculture specialist, was pacing by the window, her tablet clutched to her chest. You do realize what you did in there, don't you? She asked Marcus. You publicly defied the Empress of the Velkari hegemony. In her own throne room. In front of the entire court. I'm aware. She's executed people for less. She's executed entire delegations for less. I'm aware of that too. Tanaka stopped pacing. Then why do it? We had room to negotiate. We could have offered something else. Technology, resources, a trade agreement. Anything. Marcus moved to the window. Outside, the Velkari capital stretched to the horizon. Spires of black glass and silver metal, beautiful and cold. Millions of lives moved through those streets, each one shaped by an empire that had lasted longer than human recorded history. Because she wasn't testing our negotiating position, he said. She was testing us. Tanaka frowned. What do you mean? I've read every report on Empress Valeth, every intelligence briefing, every diplomatic analysis. Do you know what they all say? That she's ruthless, brilliant, possibly unstable after the... Tanaka stopped. After the assassination of her consort, Marcus finished. 7 years ago, the same year the Kepler-7 colony ship launched, the same year my wife died. The room went quiet. High Consort Rethelin was killed by separatists from the outer territories, Marcus continued. The Empress personally led the fleet that destroyed their homeworld in retaliation. 3 billion dead. She hasn't taken another consort since. Hasn't shown interest in any of the nobles her council has paraded before her. What does that have to do with... A chime sounded at the door. Marcus straightened his uniform. Come in. The door slid open to reveal a Velkari woman in the formal robes of a court attendant. But something about her bearing suggested she was more than that. The way she held herself, the quality of the fabric, the subtle jewelry at her wrists. Ambassador Cole, she said, her voice musical but precise. I am Lady Sareth. The Empress requests your presence for a private dinner. Chen shot Marcus a look that clearly said trap. Just me? Marcus asked. Just you. He nodded. Lead the way. The private dining chamber was smaller than Marcus had expected. Intimate even. A single table set for 2, with dishes that steamed gently in the soft light. The Empress stood by a window that overlooked a garden of bioluminescent plants, their glow painting her silver skin in shades of blue and green. She'd changed from her coronation robes into something simpler, still elegant, still clearly expensive, but less formal. More human somehow. You came, she said without turning. You summoned. That's not the same thing. She finally looked at him. Others have refused my summons. They tend to regret it, and yet you gave them the choice. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. Sit. They sat across from each other, the table between them laden with dishes Marcus couldn't identify. He waited. You're not eating, the Empress observed. Neither are you. Perhaps I'm not hungry. Perhaps neither am I. She studied him. Without the weight of the court watching, her expression was different, still guarded, but less performative, more real. Tell me about your daughter, she said. Marcus's hand tightened on the table edge. How do you know about her? I know everything about you, Ambassador Cole. I knew everything before you set foot in my throne room. Emma Cole, 19 years old, resident of New Providence on Kepler 7. Agricultural engineering student. Volunteers at the colony orphanage 3 days a week. Her mother was Sarah Cole, deceased 7 years ago from the Kepler fever outbreak. If you're threatening her, I'm not. The Empress's voice softened, almost imperceptibly. I'm asking because I want to understand. Understand what? Why you stood there today, knowing I could destroy everything you love with a single command and refused to bend. Marcus was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than it had been in the throne room, because bending wouldn't have saved her. It would have just delayed the inevitable. You don't want tribute from Kepler 7. You want to test whether humanity will submit. If I bent today, you'd have pushed harder tomorrow. And eventually, Emma would be in danger anyway, either as a colonist to be claimed or as a citizen of a species that learned to kneel. The Empress didn't respond. She was very still. I lost my wife, Marcus continued. I couldn't save her. I couldn't even be there when she died. I was 100 light years away, coordinating supply shipments, while she was holding our daughter's hand and telling her everything would be okay. He met the Empress's gaze. I won't lose Emma too. Not to a plague, not to an empire, not to anything. Even if standing against me costs you your life. My life stopped mattering the day I heard Sarah's voice on that last recording. The only thing I have left is making sure Emma has a future. A real one. Not one lived on her knees. The Empress rose abruptly, turning back to the window. Her shoulders were rigid, her hands clasped behind her back. Rethalan, she said, used to say something similar. Marcus didn't move. He was from a minor house. Barely noble. My council was furious when I chose him as consort. They wanted me to bond with someone powerful, someone who could strengthen our political position. She laughed, that same sharp sound from the throne room. He told me that his house's weakness meant he had nothing to offer me but himself, that he would stand beside me not because it benefited him, but because he chose to. And you believed him? For 2 years, I tested him. I gave him every opportunity to prove he was just like the others, seeking power, seeking influence, seeking to use me. She turned to face Marcus. He never did. Every test, he chose loyalty over advantage, honor over gain. What happened to him? He died protecting my sister from the separatists' bomb. Threw himself over her body, saved her life. The Empress's voice was flat, controlled. He was dead before I reached them. Marcus thought of Sarah, in a quarantine ward on a planet he couldn't reach, watching her own vital signs fade, while she recorded a message for a daughter she knew would grow up without her. I'm sorry, he said. The words felt inadequate, but they were all he had. Don't be sorry, the Empress said. Be honest. Is everything you said in that throne room true? Or were you simply calculating the best strategy to save your people? Does it matter? Yes? She stepped closer. It matters to me. Marcus rose from his chair. They stood facing each other, two grieving souls in a room designed for enemies. It's true, he said. All of it. The Empress studied his face for a long moment. Then, slowly, she extended her hand. Her fingers were long and elegant, tipped with nails the color of burnished copper. "In my culture," she said, "this gesture is reserved for those we consider equals, regardless of station, regardless of species." Marcus took her hand. Her skin was cool, smooth, with a texture like fine silk. "In mine," he said, "it means the same thing." They stood like that for a heartbeat. 2, 3. Then the Empress released his hand and stepped back. "Tomorrow," she said, "I will announce my decision regarding Kepler-7. I suggest you get some rest, Ambassador. The coming days will require strength." "And what will that decision be?" She smiled, a real smile this time, small and tired and genuine. "I haven't decided yet. But I find myself hoping for the first time in a very long time that I make the right choice." The explosion woke Marcus at dawn. He was on his feet before the debris stopped falling, training overriding the fog of sleep. Through the dust-choked air he could hear screaming, his team's voices calling out in the darkness. "Chen! Patel! Tanaka! Here!" Chen's voice, rough but alive. "Patel's hurt. She's bleeding." Marcus found them in the corridor outside his quarters, Chen pressing his jacket against Patel's shoulder. The young ensign's face was pale, her breath coming in short gasps. "What happened?" Marcus demanded. "Bomb," Chen said. "Someone hit the east wing. The guards." The door at the end of the corridor burst open. Armed Velkari in unmarked armor poured through, weapons raised. Not guards. Not soldiers. Assassins. Marcus moved without thinking, grabbing a piece of debris and hurling it at the lead attacker. It wasn't much, a distraction, nothing more, but it bought Chen enough time to pull Patel behind an overturned pillar. "Get them out," Marcus shouted. "Find the Empress's guard." Something struck him in the chest. A stun pulse, he realized dimly, as his muscles locked and his knees buckled. The world went gray at the edges. The last thing he saw was the assassin's leader stepping over him, speaking into a communicator. "We have the human." Proceeding to the throne room, he woke in chains. The throne room was unrecognizable. Smoke hung in the air, and the beautiful obsidian floor was cracked and scorched. Bodies lay scattered, guards, nobles, servants. The violence had been sudden and overwhelming. And there, on the steps of her throne, was the Empress. She was on her knees, her wrists bound in front of her, her face bloodied. 3 assassins stood around her, and a 4th, the leader, paced before her with a datapad in his hand. "The communications array is secured," he was saying into the device. "No distress signal reached the fleet. The outer territories will have full control within the hour." Lord Ketharon's voice crackled through the speaker. "And the Empress? Alive, as you requested. Good. I want to see her face when she realizes her precious empire has fallen." Marcus tested his chains. They were solid, locked to a pillar behind him. Even if he could break free, 4 armed assassins stood between him and the Empress. But she had seen him wake. Her 4 eyes found his across the ruined chamber, and something passed between them. A question, a plea, a spark of desperate hope. He gave her the smallest nod. "You're awake." The assassin leader approached him, weapon drawn. "Good. The uncle wants you to watch." "Ketharon," Marcus said. "This is his doing. Lord Ketharon will be emperor within the hour. The outer territories have already pledged their support. The fleet commanders who remained loyal to this," he gestured dismissively at the Empress, "this grief-addled failure, are being dealt with as we speak." On the steps, the Empress's face contorted. Not with fear, with rage. The same rage Marcus had seen in the throne room, but deeper now, raw. "My uncle," she said, "is a coward and a traitor." The assassin kicked her in the ribs. She doubled over, gasping. Valith Velkaran is no longer Empress, the leader said coldly. She is a prisoner, and prisoners do not speak unless addressed. Marcus watched, calculated. The chains wouldn't break, but the pillar they were attached to had been damaged in the explosion. A crack ran up its base, weakened by the blast. If he could shift his weight just right, the human watches you fall, the leader continued, turning back to the Empress. Your final humiliation. An inferior species witnessing the end of your line. He is not inferior. The Empress raised her head, blood trickling from her lip. He is worth more than every noble in this court. More than my uncle. More than you. The leader laughed. You've lost your mind, Majesty. Just like they said. Grief-broken and weak. No ani, Gadab Dawan. She met Marcus's eyes again. For the first time in 7 years, I see clearly. The pillar cracked. Marcus threw his weight forward as the stone gave way, and the chains, still attached to their anchor, swung free. He moved before the assassins could react, whipping the heavy links around and catching the nearest one across the face. The leader spun, weapon rising, but the Empress was faster. She surged upward, bound hands or not, and drove her shoulder into his chest. They went down together, struggling for the weapon. Marcus caught the second assassin with a kick, then wrapped his chains around the third's throat. Combat training he hadn't used in years came flooding back. Not graceful, not elegant, but effective. The fourth assassin aimed at the Empress's back. Marcus didn't think. He threw himself between them, chains swinging, and felt the energy bolt slam into his shoulder. Pain exploded through his arm, white-hot and blinding. He hit the ground hard. Above him he heard the Empress scream, not in fear but in fury. The sound of struggling, of impact, of a body falling. Then hands on his face. Cool, smooth hands. You fool, the Empress whispered. You absolute fool. Is he dead? Marcus managed. The shooter? Yes, they're all. Her voice broke. Why did you do that? Because the pain was making it hard to think. Because some things matter more than survival. She stared at him, her 4 eyes wide, her bloodied face close to his. You used my own words, she said. They were good words. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then, carefully, gently, she pressed her forehead to his. A gesture Marcus didn't recognize, but understood instinctively. In my culture, she whispered, this is how we honor those who would die for us. I'm not dead yet, no. She pulled back, and her expression hardened into something fierce and determined. And you won't be. I swear it. She rose, pulling him up with her despite his protests. Around them, the throne room was silent except for distant alarms. We need to reach the communications center, she said. If Ketharan has the fleet, we need to broadcast proof that I'm alive before. Your Majesty! A voice from the doorway. Lady Sereth, her elegant robes torn and bloodied, stood with a group of armed guards wearing the Empress's personal insignia. We received word. The princess is secured, but Lord Ketharan's forces control the eastern spire. The communication array intact. We held it. The Empress looked at Marcus, still leaning heavily against her, his shoulder bleeding. Can you walk? Do I have a choice? No. He almost smiled. Then I can walk. The broadcast went out at noon. Empress Valith stood before the camera, her face cleaned of blood but her wounds visible, her voice carrying across every frequency in the empire. Citizens of the Velkari hegemony, I speak to you not from a throne but from the ruins of one. My uncle, Lord Ketharan, has betrayed our empire. He has murdered loyal servants of the crown. He has attempted to claim power through violence and treachery. She paused, and her eyes found Marcus standing just off camera, his shoulder wrapped in emergency bandages, his face pale but determined. He has failed. The response was immediate. Fleet commanders who had been wavering declared their loyalty. Noble houses who had been waiting to see which way the wind blew threw their support behind the legitimate Empress. Within hours, Ketharan's forces were in retreat. Within days, he would be captured. But that was days away. Now, in the quiet aftermath, Marcus sat in a medical bay while a Valkyrie doctor clucked over his shoulder wound. "Primitive physiology," she muttered. "Only one cardiovascular pump. Remarkable you survived." "Humans are stubborn," Marcus said. "So I've observed." The door opened, and the Empress entered. The doctor bowed hastily and retreated. Valith looked exhausted, the deep, bone-weary exhaustion of someone who had been fighting for too long. She sat in the chair beside Marcus's bed, her movements lacking their usual grace. "The council wants to execute Ketharan publicly," she said. "Make an example of him. What do you want?" "I want him to suffer. I want him to spend the rest of his life in a cell, knowing he failed." She closed her eyes. "But that's not what I'll do." No, because ruling from anger doesn't work. I learned that 7 years ago, when I destroyed a world because I couldn't save one man." She opened her eyes. 3 billion dead. And it didn't bring Rethalan back. It didn't make the pain stop. It just added to it. Marcus was quiet for a moment. "What will you do? Public trial?" "Fair judgment. Whatever the law demands. No more, no less." She met his eyes. "It's what Rethalan would have wanted. It's what you would do. You don't know what I would do, don't I?" She reached out, her fingers brushing the bandage on his shoulder. "You threw yourself in front of an energy weapon for me. A human, protecting an Empress, who threatened to destroy his world. You weren't going to destroy anything. You didn't know that." "Yes," Marcus said quietly. "I did." Valith's hand stilled on his shoulder. Her expression shifted. Surprise, vulnerability, something deeper. "How?" "Because when you talked about Rethalan, I recognized the look in your eyes. The same look I see in the mirror every morning." He covered her hand with his. "Grief doesn't make people monsters. It makes them afraid. And you've been afraid for 7 years. Afraid to feel anything. Afraid to trust anyone. Afraid to let yourself hope. And you think you understand that? I think I've lived it." The silence between them was different now. Not the tense silence of adversaries, but the comfortable quiet of two people who had found an unexpected kinship. "The council," Valith said slowly, "will expect me to make a decision about Kepler-7, about humanity's status in the Covenant." "And what will you decide?" She turned her hand over, her fingers interlacing with his. "Humanity will keep its colonies. All of them. No tribute, no claims, no exceptions. The council won't like that. The council can adapt. It's what they're good at." A small smile crossed her face. "Besides, I have a new argument for them." "What's that?" "A species that produces someone willing to die for an enemy Empress after knowing her for 2 days. That's not a species to be subjugated. That's a species to be allied with." Marcus felt something loosen in his chest, a tension he'd been carrying since the moment he stepped into that throne room. "My words will change the fate of 2 civilizations," he said softly. "That's what you told me, and they have." Valith's grip on his hand tightened. "But it wasn't my words that mattered in the end, was it? It was yours. Some things matter more than survival. You showed me what that actually looks like. I just did what anyone would do." "No, Al." She shook her head. "You did what very few would do." "Human or Valkyrie?" She hesitated, then added, "Rethalan would have liked you." "Is that a compliment?" "The highest I know how to give." They sat together in the quiet medical bay, hands intertwined, 2 wounded souls who had somehow found their way to each other through politics and violence and grief. "What happens now?" Marcus asked. "Now?" Valith took a breath. Now we have a lot of work to do. Treaties to renegotiate, alliances to build, a galaxy to convince that humans and Valkyrie can be something other than adversaries. That sounds like it could take a while. Years, probably. Perhaps decades. Will you want company for all that? The Empress, no, Valeth, looked at him. Her 4 eyes, so alien and yet so expressive, held something he'd never seen in them before. Hope. There's a tradition in my culture, she said. When an unbonded ruler wishes to spend extended time with someone, she offers them a position at court. Something official. Something that requires them to stay. What kind of position? Ambassador to the Valkyrie hegemony. Permanent posting. Direct access to the throne. She paused. To me, Marcus thought of Earth, of Kepler 7, of Emma working in her fields, building a future on a world that was now safe. And he thought of the woman beside him, brilliant, wounded, fierce, lonely. A woman who had built walls around her heart for 7 years and was now, tentatively, reaching through them. I'll need to contact Earth, he said. Make arrangements for my current posting, of course, and I should visit Emma. Explain in person. I would expect nothing less. But after that, he squeezed her hand. I think I'd like to accept. Valeth's smile was small, cautious, a fragile thing, new and uncertain. But it was real. Then welcome to the Valkyrie hegemony, Ambassador Cole, she said. I suspect your tenure will be eventful? With you? Marcus smiled back. I'm counting on it. Outside the window, the Valkyrie sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold. Somewhere out there, 2 civilizations were beginning to see each other differently, not as threats or resources, but as possibilities. It would be difficult. There would be setbacks and conflicts and moments of doubt. But for the first time in a very long time, both Marcus and Valeth believed that the future held something worth fighting for, something worth living for, and perhaps in time, something worth loving.